Yes, I push the microphone. Okay, so that was the trial. So this is a great privilege to greet you all. First of all, I'm absolutely happy to greet the first woman Secretary General in our meeting. And I just told our excellent Deputy Secretary General that I believe it's very important that he is taking part in our panel discussion, because if you would like to understand what is really going on, we need men on the board on that issue as well. So, and of course, again, I'm very happy to work together for long years with my great friend, Petra Bayer, who is chairing this committee, and of course the Secretariat for preparing this meeting. So I just would like to tell you how important it is to host this meeting by the Parliamentary Network Women Free from Violence. I hope that everyone following us today is keeping safe in the current situation, but the good news that we are here physically, and I can tell you we missed you the last 18 months very much. And I can also tell you, all those who are with us, that special thanks for everybody in this house who did an amazing, huge work to get all the possibility to be always connected. I believe that you worked more than normal, because we had to learn all these techniques. So special thanks for the preparation, all of you, because I believe it has been an amazing, great fun for us to learn the new techniques as well. And of course, I'm delighted that we are able to resume our work today under the best possible conditions. We will have the opportunity to discuss the role of the Istanbul Convention as a powerful tool for protection against violence against women, and of course, domestic violence. Parliamentarians from the Assembly, and I really would like to greet all my fellow parliamentarians who are here and who are in the virtual sphere. We will have the possibility to ask questions to our great speakers here physically and online as well, while all other interested parties and the general public will be following us live, and I really hope that if you have any comment, please don't hesitate to send to our Secretariat, because we really need to learn from your comments as well. And I'm also happy to inform you that on Wednesday, I really would like to warm-heartedly invite you all in a high-level debate on the Istanbul Convention, 10 years on, which will start at 11 in the hemicycle with the participation of prominent speakers, ministers. It will be our opportunity to reiterate our support for the Convention and commit to step up our parliamentary involvement. I will have a great responsibility of outlining ways forward after the debate. So our meeting today is really a build-up to this important Assembly event and an opportunity to contribute to thinking about how to go forward. I really would like to remind you, when you would like to ask the floor, you should click on the request to speak, demande de parole, bottom. Of course, your name will then appear on the list of speakers, and you can see if you click on the request list icon on the right of your screen. Normally, if it's on the right of your screen, if you are dealing with a telephone, it might be in a different place, so please don't follow me if you have a different instrument. And of course, when I give you the floor, you must then manually activate your microphone and, of course, a camera. It's always an exercise, any of us who do it when we cannot be here physically together. And of course, when you take the floor, I ask you to change the language selection at bottom left. Again, it's about the normal computer on the screen to floor, and then you can find the different languages. And I also would like to greet our great interpreters here in the room as well. And of course, the documents, which are always very well prepared for the meeting, can be found under the document icon on the right-hand side of your screen, again, if you have a computer. So let's start the agenda. First, we really would like to adopt the agenda sent last Monday. I hope that everybody had the time to go through and to read it. And of course, if there is any members who has a remark, please ask the floor now. I don't think it is the case. It means that the team prepared an excellent job, so thank you for them. And of course, I would say then we can really go, so there is no changes, then we can adopt the agenda. So thank you very, very much. And now let's go to the second point. It's about the minutes. You have in your file the minutes of the meeting of the network, and I can tell you on the 15th of March it has been an amazing meeting on gender equality by video conference in the framework of the Commission on the Status of Women. Of course, this is the second year that we could not participate physically in New York, but let's hope that next year we can really do that. My question is, does anybody or anyone wish to comment of these minutes? If it is not the case, then of course I think it is properly well done. And now let's go to the third point of the Istanbul Convention, which I strongly believe is a super powerful tool for protection against violence. And now when we come to item 3 on the agenda, and this is a hearing on the Istanbul Convention as a powerful tool, again, for protecting women. It is a big pleasure, again, and I really would like to give the floor to Mr. Bjørn Berge, elected Deputy Secretary General of the Council of Europe in spring, for his first exchange of view with our committee, led by an excellent head of secretariat by Despina, the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination, and of course our Parliamentary Network Women Free from Violence. Of course, I really believe that you will present the work of the Council of Europe, including Grevio, and this is a great opportunity to tell that Grevio did an amazing job. Thank you very much for them. And of course, with regard to the promotion of the ratification and implementation of the Istanbul Convention. So dear Deputy Secretary General, it's a great honor when both of you, the Secretary General and you, are here with us as well. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to all of you, Despina, Petra, all parliamentarians and dear friends, and also those of you who follow us from afar. It is a pleasure to take part today, and I want to begin by thanking my fellow panelists and the organizations that they represent. Women Against Violence Europe, WAVE, does fantastic work collecting and disseminating data on violence against women and children, and providing help and advocacy for those in need. I also want to mention in particular today the Portuguese platform for women's rights. It excels in the training, lobbying, and awareness raising that it provides, and which are central to empowering and mobilizing NGOs and the women whose rights they champion. And Human Rights Watch has a long and staunch, has for a long time been a staunch advocate for ratifying and implementing the Istanbul Convention, recognizing it as key to tackling violence against women and domestic violence across Europe. The work done by you and other groups brings you face to face with the terrible reality of what so many women suffer. And the experience and insight that you pass on are vital for shaping the views and responses of governments and international organizations alike. I know that the members of the Parliamentary Network Women Free from Violence can attest to this. We owe you, as a matter of fact, a great deal. Certainly your solidarity counts now more than ever. The 10th anniversary of the Istanbul Convention has brought mixed emotions. On the positive side, this treaty has come a long way over the course of a decade. Let me start with the conclusion. The Istanbul Convention saves lives. It is the gold standard in its field, 34 countries have now joined it, and we welcome the very recent ratification by the Liechtenstein Parliament. This is an important political signal to all of us. The Istanbul Convention's impact on European justice is there to see. In government efforts to define and criminalize specific acts, in the added support that many authorities now provide for women in danger, and in the changes to the way in which criminal justice systems deal with these crimes where they occur. Preventing violence, protecting victims, and prosecuting the perpetrators. As a matter of fact, that's all that the Istanbul Treaty has ever been about. And the added value of an international legal treaty is clear. Helping raise the standard of national provisions, providing the independent monitoring and support that helps national authorities to overcome hurdles, and ensuring the cross-border cooperation between legal systems that allows the effective prosecution of international cases. Last month, our monitoring body, Grevio, published a very interesting review of the 17-country evaluations it has carried out since the conventions entered into force 10 years ago. These reports analyze states' parties' level of compliance and record many positive examples. They also provide guidance to the authorities on where to concentrate efforts and what might be done to best ensure that women and girls live a life free from violence. And all of this comes with being part of the Convention. Despite this progress and support, we have to face the fact that the Istanbul Treaty is being challenged in part of Europe today. The rise of extreme populism and nationalism have fueled a backlash against women's rights. And misunderstandings and false narratives are being used to undermine support for the treaty. In the case of one government, they have been used as justification for leaving it. Meanwhile, the impact of the COVID-19 has laid bare how easy it is for abuse to surge. Women who have been trapped at home with abusers during lockdown periods have often paid a heavy price. The Secretary General's strategic framework for the Council of Europe gives us a very important long-term perspective for our work, and it was adopted at our Hamburg ministerial session in May. Among its priorities for the next 4 years is the protection of women, and the Istanbul Convention is at the heart of that effort. Now we must work for further ratifications and for the full implementation of the treaty in those countries that have joined it. We must redouble our efforts. This is vitally important, and I'm sure our monitoring body, Grevio, will continue to support national authorities in achieving it. But to succeed, we must work together, join forces, institutions, governments, and individuals too. Article 12 of the Istanbul Convention states that parties should take measures to encourage all members of society, especially men and boys, to contribute actively to preventing all forms of violence covered by the scope of the Convention. This is very important and something to which I am personally committed. I'm very grateful to the Parliamentary Assembly and you as individual MPs for promoting the Istanbul Convention and helping many more understand its importance. And I return to where I began at the start of this speech and say to my fellow panelists that we need you. Your work uncovers the facts. It provides support for those who suffer. and it helps create the conditions in which change becomes possible. So please, stay close to us and let us join forces. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bjørn. I think it's absolutely good that you named us by our first name. And I would say that's always natural that man names us by the first name. I really wish that we women would do the same. So I really would like to tell you, if there is an equality, then we should have equal treatment. So I feel that you are a friend of us, so I absolutely appreciate that you dared to do so. And of course, I would say, I just would like to send one more sentence, that your personal commitment is absolutely crucial, and the excellent news concerning Liechtenstein, I believe it was really nice that you also mentioned. So let's see who is our excellent speaker, who is not here with us, but she's going to join online. So I really would like to give the floor to Ms. Marcella Pirrone. She's the president on Women Against Violence Europe. She could tell us what has changed for the NGOs providing assistance to survivors since the entry into force of the convention. So it's a great privilege that you are with us. Thank you very much for your hard work and commitment to this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you all for having invited me at this important assembly and conference. Distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, of the Committee of Equality and Non-Discrimination, all the audience, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be representing here WAVE, and I thank the Deputy Secretary General for his generous words about our work and the recognition of it. WAVE Network represents 160 member organizations in 46 European countries, and members who are actually working on the front line. They are supporting the women in those countries straight on their needs. WAVE recognizes the extent to which this convention has helped our everyday work to protect women and girls from violence, and its role as a major human rights treaty. Just to mention some groundbreaking features of the convention which have really helped us to work more efficiently. The recognition of violence against women as a violation of human rights in the form of discrimination, very crucial. This means that states are held responsible if they don't respond adequately to such violence. The criminalization of specific new offenses, it's also helped in many states to be more careful about certain crimes and violence against women and girls. The call for the involvement of all relevant state agencies and services so that violence against women and domestic violence are tackled in a coordinated way. This is crucial for having a joint response from the institutional level and the civil society together. The importance of the Istanbul Convention really recognizes the importance and value of civil society and women's specialist services, the ones like WAVE who are really tackling this problem since more than over 30 years. So WAVE as a network, and with its members in every single region and nation across Europe, strongly supports with own campaigns and actions Istanbul Convention's request to all states that they adopt a holistic response to violence against women and domestic violence, applying the 4Ps approach of the Convention. WAVE has never stopped to promote the ratification of every single state, the EU accession, and not to forget the practical implementation of Istanbul Convention. And on this issue, I think that there is certainly an important task for this Parliamentary Assembly in its role as a motor for the governments of the 47 government countries demanding action on the Istanbul Convention. I think this is a very, very great task which is important to be followed. Not only for the ratification, as we have heard, and that implementation, but also for the application and also attention to the Istanbul Convention principles, because we have seen among our members that also in those states which are at the moment quite opposing the ratification, or even, as we know, regretting to have ratified it, there are on national level, sometimes on local levels, initiatives taken by civil society to apply in any way the Istanbul Convention's principles, because they are really breaking through. So this is also quite an interesting practice we can see, for example, in Hungary or Ukraine, and some other states are trying this way to anyway, the civil society is anyway giving value and implementation to the principles of Istanbul Convention, because it is this instrument to help to tackle violence against women. So WAVE members, as the Women's Specialist Support Services, have seriously engaged, and this is also a very important task and help for us with Gravio in the monitoring processes by contributing to country shadow reports, providing our expert perspective from the front line about national context-specific issues regarding the implementation. While WAVE will continue to raise awareness about the Istanbul Convention at every opportunity, we will also strongly engage against every attack coming from the increasing ideological and political forces which are very dangerously trying to bring back a view of the traditional family where women's basic rights and freedoms are questioned and thrown back decades, at the same time combating every instance of gender equality. The implementation of the Istanbul Convention, of the Gravio recommendation, is a key aspect for WAVE network. The use of Istanbul Conventions, of the Gravio reports and the recommendations have really had an incredible positive effect on our advocacy and support work of the civil society and women's specialist services, and ultimately for all women, their children, for society. It has allowed a capacity building and empowerment and the recognition of the competence of the civil society and of the women's specialist services in front of social health services, tribunals and professionals. We are stronger. We can now represent the interests, the rights of the women, appealing to the Istanbul Convention's principles, to the recommendations. This gives us another strength. We can, through this, increase the credibility of women, which means minor risk of secondary victimization of these women, minor risk of victim blaming, better risk assessment, and a better tackling of the problem and taking them seriously. And what is also visible, where Istanbul Convention is ratified or implemented or even is discussed about, we can now build on a common ground and understanding of violence against women and girls that allows a reciprocal understanding between civil society and institutions and governments, networking and better coordination. So this is absolutely thanks to the Istanbul Convention implementation. Most countries who have ratified the Istanbul Convention we can observe this from our WAVE point of view, that it is somehow easy to make laws or to apply formally the Istanbul Convention principles, because that does not cost money. What we are asking for and looking for is a concrete implementation, which in fact requires much more energy, funds and effort. And this we have found also underlined in the very important Gravio horizontal review study, which has just been mentioned before. So we have a WAVE network to evidence that currently still too many countries face non or not sufficiently guaranteed implementation of these main principles of Istanbul Convention and the Gravio recommendations. The connected problem is a continuing absence of funds for all necessary measures. States must invest more funds. Otherwise, this problem cannot be prevented. Research clearly demonstrates that if investments are made, the benefits outweigh the consequences and cost of violence. This has lately been absolutely shown by COVID-19 crisis, which has evidenced the lack of adequate and appropriate services in too many areas of Europe. a reality which has already been documented in 2019, before COVID, by Wave Country Report, where it was clear that the number of shelter spaces within Europe had fallen short of the European standard, which requires 1 bed for 10,000 people. We are lacking 62%, so this is far too much. So I will conclude this short exposition also highlighting some other issues which, with experts' perspective and experience from the front line, can evidence and might be inspiration for all of you. The main issues still are the awareness raising and attention to the Istanbul Convention principles and values has to be strengthened in education and including prevention, effective prevention campaigns. We also ask for, as a prevention, to have regular women and victim-centered training to all relevant professionals. This is, from our point of view, we have experienced it since years and years, organizing intersectional trainings, multidisciplinary trainings. This is the real prevention work because it tackles prejudices, stereotypes. It gives this common ground and common understanding about the problem, and it prevents also the secondary victimization. So when we talk about prevention, we really ask for this kind of prevention, which is still far too little funded and considered. We see with a certain concern that prevention becomes more and more concentrating on perpetrators program, which is fine, but it's not as far-reaching as training. So we would really ask that prevention is not only perpetrators program, but is mainly working on these professional trainings and on giving funds to the women's special services who actually do a lot of prevention work. They not only support women when the crisis is on, they prevent new situations and an increase of dangerous situations. Last but not least, another very important task which helps to tackle this problem in a more comprehensive and scientific way is an adequate gathering of data and research. This again requires funds, requires a lot of instruments. This is absolutely crucial to be able to understand what is really needed. So we can, this way, we can really guarantee women and children's alive to live free from violence and also an effective access to justice, which is absolutely crucial. So the list is obviously not intended to overshadow the importance of everything positive, which has happened since 2014, the date of entry in force of the Istanbul Convention, the first ratifying states. But we are absolutely wanting to stress out what the great work which has still to be done for the real life of women who ask for our help. They deserve our common commitment and attention so that not only the Istanbul Convention is spread as widely as possible, but that its effective implementation really improves the quality of their life and the freedom of all women and their children to live free from violence. So I will already thank you and the colleagues I will hear later for our joint effort and for our very precious exchange and for this assembly and the committee engagement and absolute great help and support. Thank you.
Grazie mille, cara Marcella. So I would say that you mentioned so many things, even in telegraphic way, it's difficult to sum up, but you spoke about the increased backlash, of course you spoke about the traditional family, and of course you spoke about how can we be more careful about crimes, you spoke about the holistic approach, and of course you also spoke about the missing budget. So I think that's something that I also would like to remind our dear colleagues in the room. You know, that's a great action, you know, to work on. And of course, I would say that when you talk about the research proves the benefit, and actually when you spoke about the bed, I was a bit horrified that 62% beds are missing. So anyway, let's call our next excellent speaker. It's a pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Hilary Margolis, Senior Researcher in the Women's Rights Division of Human Rights Watch. Dear Hilary, your organization is firmly engaged in the promotion of the ratification and implementation of the Convention. Could you tell us how you find the Convention is a powerful tool from a human rights perspective, and what are your current priorities with regard to advocacy? So you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to everyone for having me, and to the Deputy Secretary General in particular for your participation, and all of the esteemed colleagues. At Human Rights Watch, we document human rights violations around the world and use this as a basis for advocacy at all levels, from local to international. In our research on violence against women, including in many Council of Europe member states, we see time and again how even well-intentioned law and policy fails to adequately prevent violence against women and girls, protect survivors, and hold perpetrators to account. In Poland, service providers told us how systematic government defunding prevents them from maintaining shelters and supporting women victims in entire regions, and how political rhetoric and government raids on their offices scare women away from seeking help. In Turkey, our current research shows that women are being harmed and even murdered despite protective measures available by law, in part because police and courts do not properly consider escalating risks for victims of repeated violence. An activist in Hungary recently told us how domestic violence victims calling the national hotline are not referred to services for help unless they can prove their life is in immediate danger. So, she said, as long as your husband is simply beating you regularly, but he's not stabbing you right now, this doesn't help. Groups in the United Kingdom told us how long-term erosion of support for specialist services left them struggling to help migrant, Black, Asian, and other marginalized women during the COVID-19 crisis. Yet a recently passed and supposedly once-in-a-lifetime domestic abuse law excludes critical protections for migrant women. And a review issued just last week shows that rape prosecutions have fallen by 60%, even as reports to police have increased. I could go on. Some of these governments say that their national laws and policies are already adequate, but evidence from survivors and women's groups show this is not the case. We are heartened by the commitment of many Council of Europe member states to the Convention and its standards, but we know, and our research continues to show, that no country in the region has eradicated gender-based violence, and no country is exempt from the need to strengthen its efforts on this front. All Council of Europe member states and beyond benefit from the robust standards set out by the Convention and the strong guiding hand of Grevio in its monitoring and evaluation. The Convention is not a silver bullet, but it is a formidable tool in the human rights framework. Belém do Pará and the Maputo Protocol have already driven states towards progress in other regions, and we're starting to see the Istanbul Convention having the same effect in Europe, as we've heard. But these regional standards also push each other. The comprehensive and inclusive nature of the Istanbul Convention makes it a landmark treaty and one that elevates the bar for others around the world. It mandates protections from forms of violence that were not even openly discussed when previous treaties were drafted, and explicitly protects all women and girls without any grounds for discrimination. By doing so, it not only complements existing international law, it pinpoints states' positive obligations to ensure a full range of measures in their efforts to address violence against women and girls. And by doing so, it spurs entire systems of prevention, protection, and accountability forward. A Polish women's rights leader recently emphasized to me the importance of having the Istanbul Convention's binding standards in Polish law. They are our reference point, she said, something we can strive for. For her and so many other women, the Istanbul Convention is a kind of North Star. And now is a moment we need it more than ever. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed violence against women as one of the world's most far-reaching and persistent rights abuses, the so-called shadow pandemic. We only hope that bringing violence against women out of the shadows will be among the few beneficial and lasting effects of the pandemic, and that this spotlight shifts how all leaders and policymakers tackle it. This can be a transformative moment if our governments decide to make it one. They can take this opportunity to stop applying Band-Aid solutions to chronic, pervasive, wide-ranging violence and instead commit to the long-term systemic change that is truly needed. They can finally take measures to recognize and address the interplay of violence, inequality, and discrimination in women's and girls' lives. They can ensure that combating violence against women is a priority backed by resources for specialist services, police and judicial reform, and outreach to those most at risk, rather than just empty words. Committing to and implementing the Istanbul Convention is one of the surest ways to make this happen. But the convention faces unprecedented backlash, as we've heard, fostered by dangerous misinformation rooted in efforts to consolidate political power by presenting human rights as a threat rather than a cornerstone of European values. And efforts to prevent and respond to gender-based violence have been frequent casualties. Women's rights defenders are fighting back in increasingly hostile environments and despite high personal and professional cost, but they need support. They need you to proactively and publicly champion the convention and counter misinformation about it. They need you to embrace the convention and ensure its full implementation in your country and push other governments to do the same. They need you to ensure that they can access funding, particularly where funds funneled through government are unlikely to reach frontline activists and service providers for victims of violence. And they need your solidarity. We cannot let antagonists pit women's rights against LGBT rights or exploit any fissures, whether real or imagined, between these movements. And we can't allow leaders and policymakers to divorce the right to live free from violence, whether in public or in private, from fundamental human rights. It is abundantly clear that the Istanbul Convention will motivate the state to respond to victims, a Ukrainian activist told us in April. The ratification of the Istanbul Convention would be such a big moment for me and my work, because many of the women who have gotten help from our organization, who now live in shelters administered by our organization, who are represented by our organization in courts, they could have a chance at a better life. This can be a transformative moment. Please push your government to make it one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your engagement, absolutely serious engagement. And I can really tell you that that's the first time I heard that is a really formidable tool. And all those who recognize how important it is, of course, they know. And now I see my Turkish colleagues who we immediately organized an event with her organization, you know, just to discuss that how awful it is after 10 years that countries can withdraw like Turkey did. But you also mentioned Poland and my home country, Hungary, for which we have a woman minister of justice who told me that we do everything. We does not need to ratify the Istanbul Convention, which we know exactly. This is not exactly the case. So now let's give the chance for an amazing feminist activist from Portugal, Ms. Ana Sofia Fernandes. She's the president of the Portuguese Platform for Women's Rights. And of course, she has been very active in the European Women's Lobby, in IGE, And I believe that she's a great advocate, and I'm very happy to greet my friend Edith Estrella, and thank you very much for the great presidency of the European Union. So dear Anna Sofia, I'm happy to see you. So could you tell us about the impact of the entry into force of the Istanbul Convention on your work in Portugal? But of course you have an absolutely diverse approach, so it's a great pleasure to see you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Portuguese Platform for Women's Rights, the umbrella organization of women's human rights organizations in Portugal, I thank you for the invitation. Violence against women and girls continues to be the most pervasive violation of women's human rights in Europe and worldwide, affecting the lives of millions of women and girls. It is a major concern, made even worse as the world turned upside down with the COVID-19 pandemic. The shadow pandemic, the persistent structural male violence against women and girls was made even more visible during the lockdowns. Portugal indeed was the first EU country to ratify the Council of Europe Convention on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. Our engagement with the creation of this convention goes back to 2008, when the Portuguese member of the Parliament, Mendes Bota, General Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and coordinator of the Parliamentary Network Women Free from Violence, authored Resolution 1635 and Recommendation 1847. These two documents were unanimously approved in Strasbourg that year, during the debate of the report Fighting Violence Against Women for a Convention of the Council of Europe. It urged the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe to move forward with the creation of the Convention. Indeed, this Convention is Europe's most comprehensive legal framework to protect all women and girls from violence. It recognizes the right of women to be protected from violence. It is structured around 4 pillars: prevention, protection, prosecution, and integrated policies, therefore providing orientation to prevent violence, to prosecute perpetrators, and protect the victims. The Istanbul Convention is a human rights treaty. Accordingly, violence against women is understood as a violation of human rights and a form of discrimination against women that includes all acts or threats of gender-based violence that result in, or are likely to result in, physical, sexual, psychological, or economic harm or suffering to women in public or private life. So what was the impact of the Istanbul Convention in Portugal? Looking at the 4 pillars. In terms of policies, indeed there were changes in civil and or criminal law on violence against women and girls and domestic violence. Although I must say that economic violence is still largely left out of the current legislation in Portugal, and significant forms of economic abuse are still unaddressed. There were also amendments in criminal law on sexual violence and rape. Although consent is not yet a concept in the legislation in Portugal, the chosen term was cognoscible will, which is even a bit difficult to translate. There were policies focused on women, as seen in the creation of a national action plan on violence against women. The previous ones were referred to as domestic violence, although there is still room for better integrated policies. And there improved monitoring. The Istanbul Convention opened avenues for the monitoring of policies by organized civil society, in particular, and by the external entity Grevio. The first baseline report on Portugal offered several recommendations for improvement, which the Portuguese state is striving to implement. In terms of protection, we see increased funding for shelters and other support services. Although regular, predictable funding for services run by women's rights organizations should exist and be foreseen in the state budget. We saw the creation of specialized services for survivors of sexual violence. Although I must say, issues with the Portuguese translation of Article 25 of the Istanbul Convention impacted directly on the type of services available to survivors of sexual violence. Rape crisis or sexual violence referral centers for victims were translated as crisis centers, and therefore financial support to referral centers is not yet foreseen. There are only 2 specialized support services for victims of sexual violence for women and girls in Portugal. We saw the creation of specialized services for older women, women with mental health problems, migrant and refugee women, among others. We saw the creation of common standards for service provision, although the network of professionals and services is not yet composed of specialists on male violence against women and girls, and there is still room for better functioning of the network in the community. In terms of prosecution, we saw positive developments in investigation and prosecution of domestic violence, although in Portugal the number of convictions is extremely low, which raises concerns on women's access to justice. Protection orders for victims of domestic violence or violence against women and girls were identified and or improved, and we saw improvement in risk assessments. In terms of prevention, awareness raising of violence against women and girls and domestic violence and training of professionals increased. Also, we saw the creation of school education programs on topics of gender equality and violence against women and girls, although not always dismantling the gender stereotypes and the asymmetric power relations between men and women, boys and girls, which we know are at the root causes of violence against women and girls. So despite advancements, we must still note some facts in Portugal. In 2020, 27 women, 2 children, and 3 men were murdered in the context of violence in intimate partner relations. In 2020, 27,609 complaints were made to the security forces for domestic violence, and 1,716 women and 1,317 children went to shelters. According to a recent report by the Judiciary Police, in the last 6 years, 360 women were murdered in Portugal, of which 111 in the context of intimate partner relations. This means approximately 1 woman was killed by her partner or former partner every 20 days in Portugal between 2014 and 2019. So, looking ahead, all forms of violence against women are linked and form a continuum of violence, which takes many diverse forms, from blatant violation of women's rights to more subtle or distorted forms of control over women's lives, bodies, and sexuality. Male violence against women is clearly linked to a culture of sexism in our societies. I started by noting that the Istanbul Convention was born out of a widespread consensus around its importance. This original consensus is now being shattered. As such, it is even more crucial to strengthen the Convention, namely by linking it with other instruments from the Council of Europe, such as the Convention on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings, the Gender Equality Strategy 2018-2023, and the 2019 Council of Ministers recommendation on preventing and combating sexism, which set the first ever international agreed upon definition of sexism as any expression, act, word, image, or gesture based on the idea that some persons, most often women, are inferior because of their sex. Understanding the continuum of male violence against women and girls, online and offline, including sexual exploitation, will foster better integrated policies with positive spillover effects on prevention. Every woman has the right to live a life free from violence and free from the fear of violence. Let's make this happen. The Istanbul Convention saves women's lives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muito obrigado. Thank you very, very much. And as we are really running out of the time, but I really would like to use the opportunity that the Secretary General is here with us. So, dear Despina, if you would like to make a few comments, that would be lovely. Thank you very much, warm-heartedly. So let's continue the fight together. And then, of course, if anybody would like to make a comment, of course, we really hope that we still have got a little time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear Zita. Thank you to all those who took the floor. Thanks to Bjørn for being here, Petra, our good chairperson of the committee. It is always, for me, very shocking to hear the figures, the data that you provide when you speak about violence against women. Now, when hearing you all, I have to say I have always this frustration, sometimes the feeling that we speak among ourselves where we all agree on what we say about the importance of the Istanbul Convention, the importance of preventing and combating violence against women. So the real challenge for me is to what extent we can get out, we can reach out to those who do not agree, to those who do not understand the value of an international legal instrument. But I think this is what makes the difference when we hear arguments about domestic legislation being important, even more important, some say, to really convince what makes the difference for an international legal protection system. Now, as you mentioned, most of you, the Assembly has been a key player to promote this convention. From the very first step, we feel that this is our convention in a way. So we have a special responsibility for the success of this instrument. And this is why we are organizing this event on Wednesday in our plenary. And it is the first time ever in the history of this Assembly that we are trying to do something really out of the book. It will be an experiment in a way, and I hope it will be a successful one, to mark the 10th anniversary by bringing together institutional actors, but also victims, and involve into a debate between the parliamentarians and panelists. So let me conclude by drawing your attention to the Wednesday event, 11 o'clock Strasbourg time, where we will have the depositary of the convention, the Secretary General of our Council of Europe, Maria Pejnović-Burić, surrounded by representatives of the executive, Prime Minister of Belgium, French Deputy Minister for Gender Equality, Diversity and Equal Opportunities, the Belgian Prime Minister on the screen, the French Deputy Minister will be present with us physically together with the Secretary General. We will have the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, Madame Dubravka-Simonovic, to cover the global dimension. And then we will try to have this interaction between the parliamentarians and the guest speakers moderated by our president, exactly to try to understand the reasons why some resist the convention, convince, and this will be really a challenge for you all, and I invite you very strongly to participate in this debate. And then you, Zita, will have the greatest challenge to conclude this debate as a general rapporteur. And I think this is a very important role and responsibility. I see Beatrice Fresco-Rolf also in the room, a general rapporteur before you. You have really to prove the importance of this role by wrapping up, by looking at the way ahead. Let me also say a last word. It was mentioned the sexism and how this is linked to the Istanbul Convention. There is a report that we adopted 2 years ago on sexism. And still there are recommendations that have not been implemented, including by the Assembly itself. So I take it also as a personal challenge and a personal responsibility to ensure implementation of our own texts. And you can understand, as a first woman Secretary General, it's not only a priority for the Assembly, but it's my own personal priority. Everything that relates to equality, gender equality, equality between men and women, prevention, promotion, and accountability for those who enter into acts of violence against women. Thank you very much. My best wishes for success, which should be our common success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So actually, we have 3 speakers and we have no time. But luckily, the president of the committee is in the room, so she gave us 3 more minutes. So it means that all of you could get really 1 minute comment, and of course there is going to be no reply, it looks like, but anyway, so let's see the man in the room, Bob van Pararen, and then Edith Estrella, and then my great friend Petra Stinen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. I'm from the Netherlands and I work as a man closely with the Dutch Women Council on this subject and support them and work together with them. It's a bloody shame that in 2021 still we have to discuss this subject, but it is needed to do that. And what I suggest, and I want to keep it short, I can tell a lot about this subject, that I'm thinking about a kind of movement, men against women violence. Because in fact it is now a lot of work, as you say, by the women that feel power now by this convention and with the Istanbul Convention and work on that. But I think also the other side, to say so, the men, mostly they are, they are doing that wrong thing, that you combine them. Because in fact, be sure there are a lot of men that are really supporting you, but also as a human being, completely against women violence. So that's a suggestion to work on that and organize that in a way, and I can support that and can work also with you on that issue. But I think there are many men that will support this. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, dank u wel. Of course, there is a report in preparation and there is a great opportunity to add all your excellent comments. So Edith Estrella, who is luckily here with us, she's an excellent feminist friend of mine for long years.
Thank you, Zita. Hello. First of all, I would like to greet the speakers and thank everyone for their interesting and inspired speeches. A special hello to Ana Sofia Fernandes. As Ana Sofia mentioned, Portugal was the first country to ratify the Istanbul Convention. Its rapporteur was a Portuguese deputy. We are very proud about it. Regarding domestic violence and violence against women, we have good news and bad news from Portugal. Good news, in Portugal we have good laws and good policies. The Portuguese government is very committed to this fight against violence. Bad news, the numbers and percentages are very high. A woman who is a victim of violence is excessive. Furthermore, the interpretation of laws by judges does not meet expectations. Court decisions seem to devalue this crime, which is in Portugal a public crime. And to conclude, I would like to ask how should be interpreted the fact that Turkey has abandoned the convention that was signed in that country and which has therefore taken the name of a Turkish city? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think this is a topic that I'm just looking at our president, that we should put it on the agenda and to discuss it. And the last speaker is Petra Stinen, and we really need to finish because, yes, I feel very sorry, but we do that.
Thank you, Zita. Thank you, everybody in the room. I'm here from The Hague. I have a few observations, and I will do it staccato. One, thank you very much, Madam Secretary General Despina, for your observation that we have to get out of our bubble and reach out to those, not reach out, but to learn from those who are against this. And maybe we should change our language, because I don't believe that this is a shadow pandemic we're discussing. It's not a disease. Violence against women is not a disease. We don't need a medicine. The Istanbul Convention is a human rights convention, so this is human rights violations. Then two observations on my own country. Grevio has observed that in the Netherlands there's not a gender-sensitive approach to violence behind the front door or intimate terrorism, and reports have been written, so I think we can see immediate results from the Istanbul Convention and the Grevio report in my own country. And previous Minister of Foreign Affairs, Stef Blok, and also Sigrid Kaag, the present Minister of Foreign Affairs, have been very outspoken on the withdrawal of Turkey and have seen this. The silver lining might be that we can incite other countries to ratify and sign, or sign and ratify. And lastly, commenting to my dear friend Bob in the room and all the other men, we are preparing a motion for a report on Article 12.4 of the Istanbul Convention that especially addresses the role of men and boys in fighting against this horrible human rights violation. Good luck, everybody in the room, and I wish I was with you, but in a way I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I understand that there was also a colleague of us who asked the floor 10 minutes ago. I was just informed, and the chair said that I can still give 1 minute. So, and of course, that is Celine Berge, so you are really the last.
Maybe it's meaningful, but the last word comes from Turkey, so hello from Turkey. May I say this is, I think, a great panel and a great step in the right direction for our very critical meeting on Wednesday. Clearly, the very high-level ownership that we're observing in the panel today with our very own Secretary General, as well as the Deputy Secretary General of the Council, is suggestive of how critical we view this. But there's another level of ownership that is building up and is as critical. Now, the experience in Turkey clearly is viewed as a benefit for bringing other countries closer to ratification, but the cost is paid by 83 million in Turkey. So I think we also have to consider keeping Turkey on the agenda and ensuring that Turkey is brought back into the system rather than leaving it aside and thinking of new ratifications. So I'd like to emphasize the level of ownership in Turkey. We had rallies of women this past weekend who have been calling out for the reversal of this illegal decision, unconstitutional decision of having left the convention. So clearly, the commitment at the higher level is reflected in the commitment of the women across Europe, including Turkey, to actually stay in the convention. So as our very own Secretary General has pointed out and was mentioned, I think, in the panel, I wanted to reiterate the importance of the civil society and the importance of local authorities in ensuring that we can come over this misinformation that has fed to the backlash, and also building up shelters where women will feel protected. So let's hold on to each other. Turkey has not left the convention. It might have been declared with an unconstitutional move, but the women of Turkey and the human rights defenders of Turkey are holding on with a strong ownership to the Istanbul Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and dear Felekna Suka, I feel really very, very sorry, and of course, I really hope that you are going to be one of the great speakers on Wednesday, because I did not recognize that you also asked the floor. Anyway, so you find this document now in your hands, and then you can find it also in the documents within the folder. And of course, I really would like to thank for your excellent contribution. I would say that we need more time when we would like to discuss this issue, or less speakers, so that's my conclusion. This is what I just told for the head of the Secretariat. But of course, I felt really privileged that beside the Deputy Secretary General, our Secretary General is also personally committed to this issue. And of course, concerning the next meeting, our Secretariat is going to inform you how our work will be conducted during the next months. And I really would like to thank for your excellent contribution, all those colleagues who has been with us online. And I really would like to thank the Secretariat, the interpreters, and for the techniques for this meeting, and for the huge patience of my great president. And I'm jumping out to make sure that we continue the meeting. So thank you very much again.